Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Experts Speak Must See Art of 2026. Here we are joined today by Paul Denton of the Royal Botanic Gardens Kew. That's the official name. And Paul is here to share with us about an upcoming exhibition. It starts in May 9th at Kew Gardens on Henry Moore, and the title is Henry Moore, Monumental Nature. Hi, Paul.
Hello, Mary. Nice to see you.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
You're
Uh,
welcome.
for, for those who may be joining us from outer space and have no idea who Henry Moore is, let's get oriented there. British sculptor, really, some would say the face of British modernism in many ways, yes?
Yes, I mean, he was a seminal British sculptor, which informed lots of the artists we know today in terms of scale, materiality, and the abstract nature of how human and nature together. So, I mean, his work spans a career from the 1930s all the way to the 1980s. So there's a huge breadth of work and development of that work over that period.
This is why it's spectacular to have this installation at Kew Gardens because of what you just said, the relationship between human and nature. So we're going to have this beautiful, beautiful canvas, really, on
Mhm.
which to see his works. And we're going to talk about that connection between human and nature. First, let's get oriented as to because that's part of what makes this show must see is that this is a very large and very comprehensive look at Henry Moore's work, not just in the gardens themselves, but also in Temperate House, which is part of Kew Gardens, the Sherwood Gallery, and then adjoining at Wakehurst. Can you orient everybody on that?
Of course, for those who don't know, Royal Botanic Gardens Kew, we're a visitor attraction. We're a global recognized botanic garden. We're also a global science organization. We have 500 scientists working at Kew, unlocking the power of plants and fungi for a thriving planet. My role is working a lot with kind of artists and creatives to try and really inspire around why plants and fungi matter, that connectedness to nature, and the realization of that human emotional connection that we have to nature, especially, which is why Moore's work resonates so much with Kew. So, as you mentioned, this is a major exhibition. It's the largest collection of Henry Moore works ever displayed outdoors, and it spans Moore's entire career. It's entitled Monumental Nature because we have over 30 monumental works in the gardens, but it's also presented, as you said, across several sites at Kew. There's the wonderful outdoor landscape, so our living collections. There's two smaller works, working models in our Temperate House. This is one of the largest glass houses at Kew, which holds some rare and threatened and extinct plants within its collection. We have the Shirley Sherwood Gallery, which is a more intimate exploration of Moore's practice. So, um, spanning his career, but looking more at the materiality and maquettes within his work. We also have our sister site at Wakehurst down in East Sussex, where there'll be four more works placed there alongside three contemporary commissions of artists that are aligned and respond to ideas of art in nature. I guess for us, work on the site is just not just sculpture placed on our site. It's a kind of direct dialogue with our special living collections. We're one of the most biodiverse postcodes in the world in terms of our living collections. And I think that work in terms of how it resonates is particularly special.
It is special, and we're going to talk about that some more, what the work that you're doing in terms of research and contribution to the planet and things like that. It's sensational. Talk about what a viewer, I hate to even use the word viewer because it's more than that. It's a whole
Mhm.
experience because it is a 300, this is true for almost all sculpture, unless it's in a niche. You're getting a 360 view or 360-degree experience of the
Mhm.
work. Talk about what the visitor can expect walking around these monumental pieces.
Yeah, more often spoke about his sculpture as fully three-dimensional, so something you have to encounter as you move around it. And I guess Kew for us, I mean, it's a 320-acre site. It's a kind of colossal site in southwest London. Um, We were keen to explore all areas of the gardens. Obviously, there's the honeypot areas where visitors are most likely to be attracted to, where some of our kind of glass houses are. But we've been careful to curate the work alongside with the Henry Moore Foundation across the whole garden. So along uppermost vistas, along some of our most spectacular follies in the gardens, like our pagoda. So that kind of nature about not only moving around the works, but moving around the sites is really important. I mean, we've had conversations with the Henry Moore Foundation of where we put signage, where we put interpretation panels, because there's no one direct view about where you see the work. It's meant to be experienced from different angles, and I guess that's really pertinent in terms of how you see through the works with um, uh, the voids and the areas in between, which are really important because you get to see our living collections alongside, beside, and through.
This is one of the examples, double oval. This is from the 60s, 1966, with that void.
Mhm.
Talk about what Moore is doing here. We have, and this is from early on. This is from early on that he's influenced by Mayan culture, sculptures that he saw, I think, in Paris when he was visiting. That was when he was younger and seeing these lying figures, reclining figures from
Mhm.
the Mayan culture, but then having this penetrating void going through. It's this beautiful, beautiful piece.
It's gorgeous, and this one is going to be placed on the Scion Vista. So it's one of our there's certain vistas at Kew that are kind of protected vistas and the kind of line up and intersect across the gardens. And so through this piece, we'll be able to see from one direction the Palm House, Kew's oldest Victorian glass house. So physical architecture in the buildings, while on the other side, the landscape will shift and you'll see the skies, the trees behind it. And I think Moore was really interested about the spaces in between. So voids that pierce the density of those bronzes so that allow light, air, and the landscape to pass through so that the nature doesn't just surround it, it becomes part of the work itself, which is really important.
And when, at what point in his career does he go monumental?
The 1950, oh, sorry, go on, carry on.
Sorry, and go, let's connect that to what is happening. It's post World War II
Mhm.
that he goes in that direction. Is he specifically aiming for public art commissions in doing that? Say a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, the shift in scale was definitely a defining moment for his practice. And after the Second World War, as you said, he began to increasingly think about works in more three-dimensional terms. So he worked a lot on small maquettes, so in plaster, clay, or terracotta. Um, I guess what was interesting and what I've uncovered through this of working on it was that he could see the monumental in often the smallest things. So the idea of working with bones, logs, pebbles. There was a logic in terms of that he could see contours of a mountains in a pebble or cathedral-like spaces when he looked at bone. And I think that was really important for him about how things were scaled and sized up. Um, the maquettes he worked on became that bridge between the intimacy of maybe a small object that he just found and then the scale of the public sculpture. And so from the 1950s onwards, his he started working on more monumental commissions, but they were never just, I think, about size, because often we think of Moore's work as, this is called monumental sculpture, the colossal nature, of which they are, but they're more around how the human body perceives them, moves around them in relation to the space, which I think he was conscious of as well.
This is, I want to show an example of, sorry, of a maquette,
Mhm.
and which we can see in the Sherwood Gallery, correct?
Yes, the Sherwood Sherlock Gallery, I mean, it's going to be a fabulous show and it's been curated especially for Q. So it will have over 90 works within the gallery spaces, and they span all 6 decades of Moore's career and all drawn from the Henry Moore Foundation collection, but also will have loans from third-party loans. So bringing all this collection together for the first time. And for us, it allows us to touch on the ecological backdrop of his work. So there's lots of the maquettes here. There's lots of models made out of wood. I mean, so Moore explored lots of different materiality in his work, and so we touch on the devastating impact of Dutch elm disease, for example, on the English culture side that intersected with his reliance on elm as a carving material. He could no longer use it and had to move on to other materials. So that connection between what was happening ecologically in nature and the impact on his work is kind of explored through the gallery, which is really resonant for Q and our work.
Plus, we get to see his creative process, all right? How he moves from the maquettes into these monumental pieces.
100%. And the gallery will also show a selection of Moore's transformation drawings. And these were some of his early drawings from the 1930s. And they are of bone or shell that gradually kind of change and shift, metamorphosize into heads of figures in a series of sketches. So they almost become a living laboratory of how Moore could take something hard, like a skeletal fragment or a stone, and reimagine it into something soft and living. And I think that exploration through the maquettes helped him do that, the physicality of sculpting, moving, and shaping, often with the things he'd found. So the mark making of flint that was found or bone in terms of how the things were sculpted kind of really informed. And it also gave him opportunity through the maquettes to look at how things were supported. So looking at shelter and scale, how things are supported, the weight of things that could move on to the logic of kind of larger works.
So it's so, and again, this is why Q is such a perfect canvas for his works because he's very inspired by um, found objects, we could say, but
Mhm.
they're found objects from nature, from bone, from branches, from rocks, this sort of thing. And then he goes in turn and creates, there is absolutely I would say the key component of his work is these biomorphic shapes. Yes,
Mhm.
always the connection to nature in what he's producing, even when or I should say, especially when he is sculpting human figure. It's interesting how it all connects.
You're right. I mean, Moore found inspiration from everywhere. So, from Renaissance sculpture to the global art of the time, right down to bones from his stew pot at home while he was cooking. So they were all rooted in kind of organic forms. So bones, the landscapes, the shells, but and humans' bodies connection to nature, which is why these often hard objects metamorphosized into kind of human form and that kind of juxtaposition between the two. Yeah, and as you say, Q's an ideal canvas, and the works for us don't just sit in the landscape. They can activate it. They can frame different areas of the gardens. It's reshaped. I mean, the exhibition will span many months. So it's on from 9th of May all the way to the end of January in 2027. And that seasonality of change that we'll have of Moore's work across those seasons, the works will be reshaped by light, the weather, the seasonal change, and it'll be really interesting to see how they work alongside that shifting landscape.
Even shadows cast, how the shadows are cast from the work. And as we've said, the visitor can move around in and out of those shadows as they're moving around the work. Whether it's in November, it's going to be a very different experience than in May.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah.
I mean, some of the larger works that he's created are colossal. So some are like 6 to 9 tons that will be brought to Kew, and they are of monumental scale. And so it's understanding our place against the sculpture. And I think he was very, I mean, he worked in a place in Hertfordshire called Perry Green, which was his home for many years when he moved outside of London. And this was quite a rural estate that had sheep, large mountains, and he was very interested in humans' place against that landscape and the colossal nature of landscape itself. And so the two things work alongside each other and kind of emit themselves through the work.
I hate to take a mercenary turn, but he was very, very successful,
Mhm.
particularly from the 50s onward, yes. And he's getting these public commissions. He's very well recognized. And yet, and it's because you mentioned that, his home, that he never moves into a mansion in the middle of London. He stays in this relatively small, modest home. And then I believe, bequeathed his estate to what becomes the Henry Moore Foundation. Yes, and so
That,
that's part of this as well. Yeah.
there's a certain charm. I mean, he was a Yorkshireman born and bred. So that's the north of England, which has it definitely evokes that kind of living out the idea of landscape and being in part of nature. And so I think he brought a lot of that with him to his home in Hertfordshire. And you're right, he didn't move. He had his sculpture workshops there, and the great and good used to come down and visit this essentially amazing man, almost celebrity-like status in terms of his work, and but quite a domestic scale home still of where he would have presidents and prime ministers would fly in and sit with him because they were so fascinated with his work and his practice. But yeah, he lived in that estate all his life. You're right. He towards the end of his career, well, he did lots of outdoor public commissions, and that was something we were very conscious of in terms of actually where these works are placed. I think he always believed his works fared best in natural settings, but obviously he did commissions for much more urban settings, and he often created multiple bronze casts to sit in different locations. So each one was transformed because of where it was. One of the largest works we've got at Kew is Large Reclining Figure. So the latter part of his life, so about 1983, and it's a fiberglass work, but it was an enlargement of a smaller figure that he'd originally created much earlier on in his career in the 30s. And the work was completed just 2 years before Moore's death, and it was a final collaboration with a Chinese American architect, IMP, and this
Yeah.
was in an urban location. And so he was very conscious that these works, the multiples of his work could sit in different locations and sing slightly differently in each of those.
Yeah, so I.M. Pei he's known for that pyramid structure outside of the Louvre, and it's so interesting their collaboration because Pei often has these very hard,
You're
sharp
right.
edges, these linear forms. And so the conversation between that and Moore's curves, that's interesting. Yeah.
It really is. And I think the two things that they became great friends, and they did lots of collaborations because of that contrast, but also synergy with how these kind of amorphic shapes and curves fared against as you say, the sharp-edged modernist architectural designs of IMP.
And then obviously, if it's a public commission, Moore's sculptures are often situated outside of a building, which is usually hard angles. In this installation, we don't just experience one at a time. We're moving through the space, multiple monumental pieces
Hmm.
in exactly what he wanted, what he would have wanted, I assume, in landscape and not in an urban environment. It's interesting. And he says, I'll give you a quote. He says, everyone thinks that he or she looks, but they don't really. And so it's an invitation. He has to see one after the next and moving through the space.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we are very lucky, as I said, the size and scale of Kew. Our dwell time of our visitors is quite high. It's about 4 hours in terms of when you come on site. So that opportunity that, we know lots of people may not encounter the full 30 works, but the breadth of works is there. And we're looking at doing various trails for how long you may have at the gardens or particular interest in certain works, either the scale, the monumental, the large spindle work. So we're looking to kind of curate different interactions of how visitors might encounter works depending on what they might be interested in. We hope that lots of visitors will go to the gallery as well, because I think that spanning of his whole career and seeing the process is really key to sometimes unlocking and understanding the larger works outside in terms of process, thoughts, and imagining about the scale.
Even speaking of process, even the drawings these are in the Sherwood Gallery, correct?
Yes, the tree
Yeah.
drawing. So it was earlier on in his career, but did lots of work around the tree work. So we'll be showing lots of those within the gallery space. These are beautiful drawings and etchings that are rarely seen or rarely shown. And so this contrast again back to Kew as a site that has its living collection, its trees outside, and Moore's direct inspiration from that collection is really special. We have around 300 horticulturalists at Kew that are looking about how we protect our trees and what trees we need to plant in the future as part of the climate change. And so Moore's work that spans such a career, that the technological changes and advancements in science, as well as looking at actual nature. There's something really intriguing around that, about the development of our own science, about what we'll be planting and growing in the years to come. And Moore's own work looking at that from the 1930s to the 1980s is really special.
If you're looking for one of your horticulturists after May, you can probably find them in the Sherwood Gallery, right? Looking at
I
these
think so.
drawings. And again, we get to see the creative process, drawings, maquettes, and then to go outside. As you say, maybe it's best to go to the gallery first and walk through how this happens, how he creates.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And the gallery will unlock some of the questions. I mean, everyone sometimes thinks they've seen them all, they understand it, but actually there's certain real beauty to how the development of his practice that we are trying to tell through the exhibition. So take the human forms, so the reclining figures. Moore was deeply influenced by Aztec and Mayan Chacmol figures. So these are figures that often recline in nature and the angle at which they recline. And so that influence stayed with him for decades. And you can see that through the work. So we get lots um, of the reclining figures that we see later on. So we've got works such as Two Police Reclining Figure, and the works totally echo that research that he did earlier on in his career. So there's those beautiful connections for his inspiration, but then how it kind of played out in terms of the actual work.
This is one called Vertebrae. And again, it's that connection with the human form, but it's reclining, obviously. And yeah.
Yeah, and I think here as well, back to that point around the voids in between. So you can see
Mhm.
there's the separate elements, there's negative spaces, we can
Mhm.
see landscape and light and air pass through. And I think that almost became a real feature and importance about how you move and see the work differently. But yes, this abstraction of a human form in a reclined figure, um, beautiful to understand when you look at the influence.
Talk about a little bit more about the materials that he chooses, particularly for the monumental pieces that are in the installation. And how did you move these around? A lot of difficulty there, yes?
Yes, I mean this. I stand as my role. I stand on the shoulders of the great team around Q, and I mean this exhibition wouldn't be possible without the close collaboration with the Henry Moore Foundation themselves. So the expertise of their curators, Sebastiano Barassi and Laura Bruni, alongside their conservator James Copper and the team there, the great understanding of these works and how to care for them has been kind of essential for us, giving us that advice, that scholarly advice of fulfilling this project at such a scale. Lots of the works, all the works are from the Henry Moore Foundation, but they obviously were in various locations around the UK, and lots of those works have been recalled back to Perry Green to have some conservation work undertaken, and then they're all brought to Kew en masse, and it's a huge undertaking. I mean, 30 works that will be brought to the garden is colossal, and it's around going to be about 2 months in terms of how these works get in, because we are not just a park where works can go. We're a botanic garden, and our living collections are our collections as a museum would have a collection. So, and of course, we're 320 acres, but there's lots of trees and tree roots. So it's been a very interesting process, not only of curation of where we want the works to be placed, but the possibility of can they go there? Because we know some works will work really well in some locations, but we have to get ground penetrating radars to check the root systems to understand if we can place these colossal works of this scale in there. So it's been a huge effort in the locations of where they will go across the organization. And we're working with a great team of art handlers that know the work. They've been working with the Moore collections for quite a long time, but these are, colossal works to move. And we've seen some images in the press of some of the works moving from other locations being kind of hoisted up, and it's exciting and terrifying in equal measure.
It is terrifying, especially you don't want to be under it for
Yes.
sure. Yeah. Say a little bit more about his choice of materials because these are bronzes, but what else is he working with? And I'm just gonna show us an image of him actually carving.
Yeah, it's a great image, isn't it? Yeah, I mean the later works are bronze, but the patination of the bronzes change and move around, and that's that development through the kind of maquettes that he used and how and the development of practice. So um, there was, we look at works like Spindle Piece, for example. So that was directly inspired by flints, but you can see from the plaster casts in order to create the bronzes later, you can see the pressed flint into the plaster, which then makes its way into the kind of patination and the markings through the bronze. So you get to capture that different surfaces and impressions of the materials he's working with, which is really lovely to see. Um, and bronze allowed a certain density and level of complexity that could grow these works to the size and scale that he needed to. But as I alluded to earlier, we've got a fiberglass work as well within the Gardens show, the reclining figure work. The gallery will show the maquette is interesting because it shows the process of wood carvings to stone to plaster and to then the bronzes. So it was based on scale carvings, shaping of the work, which kind of informed what material he used. But I guess bronze gave him the legitimacy to go larger and have more kind of dominance in scale and legacy and lasting, enduring nature of the sculptures.
That's a great word because it is for me the experience of Moore's work is there is so much it's dominant these monumental pieces there's a
Mm.
dominance there but also strangely a buoyancy a lightness to it as well
Yeah.
and you also mentioned the patination which he has no control over but is clearly forecasting what is going to happen when these pieces are outdoors to the surface.
Yeah, definitely. And that, I mean, it's tricky, isn't it? Because I've now seen lots of more works in different locations, and they take on almost different sizes and the scale to where they're placed. We often find whenever we commission things at Kew, you see things in a studio setting and they look colossal. They come to Kew and suddenly like, oh, they look they don't look as big because of the nature of the landscape, and it's very tricky. These works still have a kind of colossal nature, but you're right, they don't feel heavy or heavy in a way that other sculptures do. They've got a lightness, I think, due to the curves and the light and the voids in between. They have a kind of lightness to them in terms of how they sit, which is obviously very clever and why Moore was such an expert. But it's different from other works, and they'll still. I think they have that colossal nature, but in a very kind of in a different way to other works, I think, that are often placed within the gardens.
I'm so excited. I'm going to be able to come and see it, and I'm really
Brilliant.
excited because it's there through 3 seasons at least. Really four.
Yeah, yeah.
January, that'll be winter. I wish I could come back 4 times and see it in all seasons, but I that exactly is what I look forward to is seeing them in nature, in the light, especially in the light and how the
Mhm.
light interacts, and of course the surrounding landscape. So it's going to be a great experience, I think, for your visitors.
Yeah, and we're really keen to open this up to visitors that may know more and be, love more, but those visitors that have never experienced more, they might have seen one in a public park somewhere, but actually to understand the importance of this artist and the importance of why this work is at Kew and the synergy of that, I think opening it up to new visitors to encourage to see art in nature, that connectedness. This is not a white-walled gallery space, it's a very different environment, and it offers a certain fluidity in terms of how you encounter the work and understand it. We've worked a lot with our interpretation teams in terms of how we really break down and make the works accessible for people to understand them, while not dumbing down the content. It's that kind of ways in for people to ways of seeing, move around the work. And so we're hoping this can really open up this to a whole new generation of visitors that may have never encountered more or encountering more for the first time.
And a whole new group of appreciation.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. Let's talk before we go about, because I really want to be emphatic about this, the work that Q does in terms of research, in
Mhm.
terms of climate change, in terms of sustainability. Can you talk, what's happening now? What's on now in that regard?
Yeah, as I mentioned at the start, we have over 500 scientists working at our 3 sites, and I bring lots of artists in that are interested in our collections. I mean, we've got a huge range of collections, not only our living collections, but our 8 million herbarium specimens of dating back to Darwin times. Lots of artists are interested in probably niche levels of plant science, and we most likely will have a scientist working in that area. So really unlocking what the power of plants and fungi can do to combat the climate emergency. So we often work globally with communities around the world that look at what we can grow in better climates. So what plants are more drought resilient? What plants can face the increasing temperatures that we're all facing to kind of grow better? So looking at food security, looking at the biodiversity loss and the need for biodiversity to combat kind of monocultures and diseases going in the future. So we're doing really important work around plant conservation and plant management, but working kind of on that global scale with communities around the world. And so again, it's that understanding about why everyone should care about plants and fungi and why they should matter. It's a really important mission. We often see animals in a setting and we don't recognize the green space behind them. The green space is what's allowing those animals to survive, including us. And so it's really important that we protect the green space around us. And that's what Q's doing in terms of the future.
That's what Q's doing, and I think that's what Henry Moore is doing or was doing. And that's why it's such a perfect canvas for his work. And it's a great opportunity for us to come and see um, really what this artist is all about. Yeah. Thank you so much for putting this
Thank you.
together. I really appreciate it, Paul. So it's Henry Moore, Monumental Nature, running from May 9th to January 31st. And not just in the park itself, but also in the Sherwood Gallery, the Temperate House, and in Wakehurst.
Yes, that's correct. Wakehurst is in our East Sussex, so it's our sister site, and the title there is More and More. So there's four more works, but they've commissioned three contemporary artists from the Henry Moore Institute, alumni of the Henry Moore Institutes that are not responding, but responding to work in nature and how we see differently. So it's a really lovely, beautiful contrast and a beautiful alignment to the Kew Gardens program as well. So we're very excited about it. All kind of knits itself together in what is a beautiful package for visitors to come and see.
I think that at the Wakehurst, it goes a little bit longer. I think through
It
May.
does. It
Yeah,
goes to May and
yeah,
27th. There's lots of
yeah.
opportunity to see works
So
there.
plenty of time, all the seasons. Everyone should go see.
Indeed.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you.
Yeah.